Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, an entitled Karen slaps my child at Toys R Us and totally freaks out. She calls the police on me to get me arrested, but the scene quickly turns around. Here is what happened. The title story starts like this. Context: this story was posted in the early 2000s. So, my name is Samuel Adams, or Sam to my friends. I own a Toys R Us store in the downtown district of my city, which continues to be a great conversation starter meeting new peoples at parties, especially young parents. Part of this comes from the fact that I'm only 28 years old, so everyone's first question is how I could afford it, and well, let's just say some business-savvy investments set me up for a little while. I own the store, but do not technically work for Toys R Us, although we have a good working relationship and I would like to think that I'm a decent landlord. As someone with a young daughter, Tyrese, 6 years old, I find I'm at the store nearly as often as some employees. But that's also where the trouble started. The day started like any other. It was a pleasant and quiet Tuesday morning in April and I was getting dressed ready to head out. I was asked to swing by the Toys R Us for a meeting with the store and regional managers over the rent and monthly projections, fairly standard procedure. As I was heading out the door, I was stopped by my wife, who said she was suddenly called into the office for something important and asked me to watch my daughter Tyrese until she returned. Tyrese must have known where I was going, as she was waiting outside for me to unlock the car. Knowing that he would be safe to hang around the aisles until I was done, we got in the car and drove over. We arrived at the store just past 10 and the parking lot was already threatening to burst with the amount of cars that flooded in. Being the owner has its perks though, and I always used a named space reserved for staff out of the public view. Leading my son in, I did my best to steer him towards the back of the store, with promises that we could take a look around after my meeting. Though he still did his best to nudge me in the direction of various toys he noticed along the way. Navigating through the bustling crowds of shoppers, we almost made it successfully to the end, but was then stopped by a lady who stopped to try and get my attention. The woman, who I would be kind to estimate was in their late 30s, was bleach blonde with a hot pink tracksuit. Adjusting to the noise, I pieced together that she wanted my help to get something from the top shelf where she insistently pointed. I was a little confused at her request, seeing as I had no uniform that indicated I worked here, and yet she was very adamant that I would help her. I was nearly tempted to help, if only to get rid of the woman, but the tug at my waist reminded me that I had to watch my son today and couldn't get wrapped up in little jobs. I apologized, saying that I was busy, and moved to carry on, turning away from her. I was even more confused when she darted around me to stop me again, insisting more strongly this time, saying that, "As a lowly employee, you need to serve me. Isn't a customer king where you come from?" This lady was starting to get on my nerves with her attitude and persistence, even as real employees passed us in the aisle. Chalking it up to early morning brain fuzz, I apologized again, saying that I didn't work here and pointed her towards the nearest employee. A firm grip on my shoulder stopped me and I turned to find the lady was not about to let me go without a fight, her demands now audibly enough to draw attention. "Don't lie to me, you lazy crap. I know you're an employee. You just don't want to work. Now get me that box or I will have your job, you dirty idiot. A black person like you should be more subservient and obey orders," prompting many gasps from the other shoppers, unsure whether to shuffle away from the ensuing chaos or to continue to stare unashamedly from a safe distance. "Talk to me again like that and I'll call the cops, lady," I threatened, hoping to scare her off her high horse, but I found it had the opposite reaction when she offered to call them for me. With help of some nearby employees who recognized me, I alerted the managers of my absence and the situation playing out, freeing up the staff room for us to wait off the shop floor. Half an hour later, a police officer arrived to deal with our squabble. During the time we waited, the room was silent, with only the sound of the ticking clock to give me something to stop from going insane or launching into another argument. To keep my son calm, I bought a build-it-yourself toy castle, which he sat with in the corner, blissfully ignorant of the mess I and she was in. The officer sat down between us, mediated, taking out his notepad to record our sides of the story. He motioned for me to go first, but the lady butted in and started anyway, going into a great and exaggerated detail into how I was a terrible employee. She seemed to talk faster than he could write. I wondered how many of those words even passed her brain before they came out. Finally, she finished and fell silent. Her anger subsided like a great weight had been lifted, and she sat smiling at me sinisterly across the table as she waited for my arrest. My turn, I slowly recalled what had happened, starting with when she grabbed me, ordered me around, and then used a racial slur. The officer paused to gaze at when I mentioned it. She quickly pretended to be on her cell phone to avoid eye contact. After considering the facts, the cop stood and turned to leave, saying that no crime had been committed, so there was nothing to be done. Jumping out of the chair, she launched herself ahead to stop him from leaving, shouting all the while that he needed to do his job. He turned slowly, and despite his burly physique, she seemed to square up to him to feebly intimidate him. Peering over her shoulder, we made eye contact, and he gave me a sympathetic look before addressing her. "Look, lady, as far as I can tell, no crime has been committed. This good man here has done nothing wrong, and I would be awfully careful if I were you in telling me how to do my job." Which made me pause for a thought. He's right, you know. Her head shivered in my direction to reveal a building temper. Anyway, just as I said, I don't work here. Well, I do own the building, but I'm not an employee. I added, revealing my trump card. Her face seemed to twist, changing shades of red between anger and embarrassment at her massive misunderstanding. The officer chuckled and left, waving to me as he opened the door. The lady then came stomping slowly towards me, but before she could reach me, Tyrese rushed over, tears welling in her eyes as the waterworks, saying through a slur of sniffles and sobs that she couldn't build it right. I thought this would stop her in her tracks, but instead she continued her advance, her attention turning to the young boy in front of her. "Hey, quit crying! Did anyone ever tell you boys don't cry?" Her shouts earned her the attention of the officer again, I noticed from the corner of my eye. As I stood to push her back, I was taken aback by her raising her hand and swiftly bringing it down, slapping Tyrese firmly across the face as if she were in the World Championships of the high five contest. Before I could knock her teeth out, the officer intervened and pulled her back, securing her arms with cuffs. It was almost funny how clueless she was as she was dragged out of the store, kicking and screaming the entire way. Without hesitation, I opted to press charges against her and said I would be visiting the station after handling business here. I still had time to do my meeting and drop Tyrese off, and it was only past noon. What a day. And yeah, Ripe Stars, what would you have done if this Karen slapped your child at Toys R Us, if it still existed? Let us know in the comments, and while you're at it, please don't forget to like the video, because that would help me tremendously. The next one is titled, I Messed Up My Neighbor. A few years ago, we had a couple buy the house 2 up from us in our street. They did renovations for the first couple of months, 7 days a week from 6 AM. As annoying as it is being woken up on Sunday mornings by a power saw, my fiance and I know that if you live near people, you're gonna hear noise, so we just rolled with it. Everything changed after the renovations were finished. The guy went back to work on night shift. All of a sudden our street had to be silent during the day so he could sleep. This self-entitled Karen went to great length to get his beauty sleep. He called the police for noise complaints any chance he got. My hippie neighbors who had their weekly afternoon jam session with acoustic guitars, my Vietnamese neighbors and their god-awful Thursday afternoon karaoke, and then it was my turn. Complaint after complaint went into the council about noise from my dogs and chickens. He would walk to my front fence, wait for my dog to bark at him, and then record it and send it to the council. Then he discovered my dog was controlled, in other words, not allowed out of my yard without a leash. One day, I left the gate open to bring chopping in. Cowie McCowface filmed my dog 3 meters out of my yard to the car, sent it to the council, and I received an $800 fine in the mail. That was the last straw. Since I'm a builder, I have access to lots of noisy stuff. Grinders, chainsaws, metal cut-off saws, etc. Since I own my own company, it's not always necessary for me to be on site. I waited for him to get home, gave him an hour to get comfortable, and then began cutting rebar with a 2-stroke cut-off saw in my front yard in 50mm sections. It took all of 15 minutes before he burst out of his house with his cranky pants on. I could not keep a straight face as I told him I was quite within my rights to do work around the house during the day, just as he had. Then I told him I had weeks of work to do, so I'd better get back to it. The look on his face brought me the purest joy I've ever felt. I would give him 30 minutes to settle in and then start cutting again for 10 to 15 minutes. Chainsaws, power saws didn't matter what I cut because it was all going in the bin anyway. It was only a couple of weeks before I got bored and ran out of crap to cut, but in that time, I took every single opportunity I could to drive that a-hole to insanity. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you've ever gotten any type of petty revenge on your annoying neighbor, please let us know about it in the comments. I would love to read your story. And the next one is titled Revenge on a Crazy Cop. My house is literally connected to my elementary school's perimeter. I occasionally used to go there at the ripe age of 15 to rip around with my RC Nitro cars on weekends. No cars, actually the parking gates were closed, but not the human entrances. Rinse and repeat for 2 years with no problems. I even had patrolling RCMP officers come over and try out my cool toys. In return, they would pull out a huge drone from their car and fly it around me to show me what drones are like and what speeds they can go at. This went well until 2015. 2016 June comes and I'm still doing that stuff while suddenly I hear police sirens. Out comes a cop, gives me a huge lecture about how I'm on federal property and I need to immediately get off because I don't have permission. This hotshot acted like I was stealing something, and he even looked through my bag without permission and found a pack of dangerous liquid packs, which turned out to be rubbing alcohol for my hands. Anyways, he issues me a $187 ticket for unlawfully operating a remote control device. I was thinking, F this, I will fight it in court. So I did my research and the ticket he gave me was actually for people who rip around in their oil-powered RC planes and private spaces without permission. This was obviously some BS. I even got the recording of his car dealing with me. A few months later, I go to the court to contest it, that's a set date, and of course the a-hole cop is there and he tells me that before I go to the court he can make my fine half if I plead guilty. I say no, and I'm pretty sure he said, "Effin' which," under his breath. We then go inside the courtroom. A-hole is all loud and proud when giving his statement. He straight up lies, saying that I was being belligerent, and I almost ran away in fear. Well, cameras don't lie, dude. When it was my turn to give my statement, I played back his cruiser dashcam, which clearly showed him being a douchebag, pointing his hands away as if he's gonna fight a 17-year-old punny 5'8" guy. The judge absolutely grilled him. She constantly said this was an abuse of power, a waste of resources, and that recommended the officer to read up on what the public and federal restricted property was. The whole ordeal was embarrassing for him, and I kind of felt bad because people were giving him dagger eyes the whole time. Anyways, the ticket is thrown out and I head out the room. I see the cop on the parking lot and right as I pass by, he says exactly, "Brown mother trucker, get out!" I was totally shocked by this, so I went home and filed a complaint at his depot. No response for 7 days and then 15, so I call them back about it. "Yeah, he's not working at this branch anymore. We can still assist you with anything pertaining to this report, sir." "Ah, no, it's alright, thanks." That was it. A-hole either got fired or got moved away. And here, Ripe Stars, it's always good to see consequences for people that act like douchebags in public. Either way, the next one is another revenge story. So I was working full-time and going to college full-time. After my morning chemistry lab, I drove from campus up where I worked only to realize that my wallet was missing from my purse. I had used it that morning, but it was nowhere to be found. I called my credit card company and sure enough, there was a recent transaction at a local bar for a large tab. I think any normal person would have claimed fraud and called the rest of the wallet items a loss. However, I immediately called the police to report my wallet stolen, either while I was in class or perhaps some other time during the day. The police told me to contact a different jurisdiction, school was on a reservation, called the reservation police who told me it's also not their jurisdiction, since I wasn't sure the loss occurred on campus and I had discovered the loss elsewhere. Cue my frustration and the budding vengeance. I'm a people person and having worked retail operations for years had a good sense of how to communicate with employees. I called the restaurant where my card was used and gave a description of the situation along with the last digits of the card number. The luckiest part was that the woman on the line happened to be the server. She gave me some key information that she legally should never have provided to someone who was not the authorities, but I think my story appealed to her. She said the tab was so high because they left such a huge tip and the guy who used the card said his girlfriend was treating him to lunch and drinks, hence the female name on the card. As well, he was with 2 people who paid for their own food and drinks with their own credit card. I asked her for the name on that second card, which she gave up without thinking twice. If that wasn't shady enough, I took advantage of a customer database to find a phone number for the uniquely named non-stealing gentleman who paid for his own tab, While dining with the thief, I built up the nerve to call the innocent guy a couple of days later, claiming to be a private investigator. I calmly warned that he would be considered an accomplice to the crime if he didn't provide the name and phone number of the person he ate with at that specific restaurant. He was nervous and didn't want to help, saying that he should call his lawyer before talking to me. I told him, as a private investigator, I would ensure he's not held accountable if he would cooperate. He could only provide a name but no phone number. Without the thief's phone number coming up in that customer database, I turned to social media. The name pulled up a local private profile. At the time, Facebook allowed banners to still be visible, which, if I remember the Stone Age of Facebook, was basically a status. His status was complaining about a chem lab test that I too was about to take. I didn't recognize his face, but I could now confirm it was stolen from lab if my professor could ID his picture. I printed the Facebook page with his picture and status and brought it to my chem teacher. I explained the situation and he told me the student sat at the corner of my table. And now it all made sense, because in chem lab we would put our bags and purses at the front of the class as to not contaminate them with whatever we worked with. That was when he had stolen my wallet from my purse days before. Working with my professor, the campus police came in during class and arrested him. Best part of this? He was on probation for some other misbehavior, so he was actually put in jail for his crime. I was not a part of the trial or anything like that, but I did explain my tactic to the reservation police, who patted me on the back. Oh, and by the way, I received compensation checks from his prison for like $2 each until my claimed $50 fossil wallet loss was remediated. As a much older person, I now hope he has his life together. I did not remember much of him in class, but I was a very focused student. We all make mistakes, but his youth seemed to be defined by a string of bad choices. Looking at his name in public records since shows that he hasn't quite found the right path. And yeah guys, honestly, no respect or mercy for anyone who steals something from someone else. The next one is titled Worst Entitled Karen. Hey everyone, just a heads up, no dogs were hurt during this situation, however, it might still be a sensitive story for some. For context, I have a German Shepherd named Max. I got him as a gift when I was 21, I'm 26 now, and he is the nicest dog you will ever meet. He is nice around other dogs, I've never seen him bite anyone, and he loves kids, which is important for later. At the time, I was fresh out of college and recently got a job at a tech company. I moved out into my current neighborhood that was not only close but had ample backyard space since Max loves to run. I found a house and moved there. After about a month after moving in, I saw one of my neighbors outside, a nice older fellow we will call Hank. I approached Hank and struck up some friendly small talk before telling him about Max. His face immediately became worried and he said, "You might want to keep him inside. Karen hates dogs." I asked who that was and he pointed to the house on the other side of mine and explained that she absolutely despises dogs and once called the police on a man walking his dogs, accusing him of intentionally pooping on her lawn. I, of course, decided to laugh this off, said goodbye to Hank and went back inside to check on Max. Fast forward a week and I let Max outside in the backyard to run, watching him to make sure he did not try to climb over the fences. He had tried doing this when my parents were watching him. I then see a kid approach Max from the other side of the gate. We will call him LG for little Goblin. So Goblin called over to Max saying, "Doggy, doggy." And I thought it was cute, so I went over to say hello when I realized he had a wooden stake in his hand. And I guess a stake is like a stick or something? Anyway, he then slashed at my dog with it when he got close enough, but since he is a kid, his stubby arms could not reach Max and threw the fence before I called him back. I then went over and asked him what he was doing. Note, I was not even yelling, I had just raised my voice a little bit. The kid, having realized he had been caught, threw the branch near his shed and ran back inside. I did not think much of it and then led Max back inside to double check to make sure he was alright. That is when I heard a knock at my door. I opened and of course there was Karen with her little Goblin behind her. "Are you the one who yelled at my kid?" I took a deep breath and said, "I did not yell at him, but I did raise my voice to him." She cut me off saying, "How dare you yell at my baby?" I then tried to explain, "Well miss, your baby tried stabbing my dog." She looked over my shoulder and saw Max laying on the couch. "No, he did not. My little gremlin would do no such thing. Besides, even if he did, your dog probably had it coming." This is when I started to lose my cool a bit and simply said, "What?" She then went into a rant about how that type of dog is dangerous and how people like you are the reason people get mauled by dogs. I simply just ignored her and said bye before closing the door in her face and giving Max a treat. About an hour later, there's another knock at my door. I roll my eyes, thinking it is Karen again, but I am surprised when it is the police. I open the door and say, "How can I help you, officer?" I see Karen standing behind them with a poop-eating grin on her face. "Officer number 1, we got a report that your dog attacked this child. Is this true, sir?" Me having realized what Karen did. "No, officer, her child attempted to stab my dog. She should have been watching him." Officer 2, "Can you back up that statement?" Me, "Sure, check near her shed, you will see the wooden stake." The officers check and found the stake, but for some reason still were not 100% convinced. Officer number 1, "Can we see the dog in question?" I call out Max and he comes running out, excited to meet the new people. I gave him some commands and he gladly did them in front of the cops. Me, "See? He's a very obedient dog, he would never hurt a kid." And I then, from behind me hear, "It is true." I turned to see Hank. He had been out mowing his backyard and saw the entire thing. "Hank, I seen it with my own eyes, officers. The kid had something in his hand and tried using it on the dog." The cops then asked Karen about her side of the story and she makes up some obviously fake lie about how Max attacked her kid for playing too loud and should be arrested for child endangerment. The cops look at each other, turned to me, apologized and then turned to Karen and gave her a fine for lying to the police. Karen was in disbelief that her story that she threw together in 5 seconds did not work. For the next week or so, anytime I would let Max out, I would watch him very closely. I got a few dirty looks from Karen and an email for her saying she was going to sue me for child endangerment and emotional distress. But nothing ever came out of it. Me and Hank still talk about this event and laugh at it to this day. Update: thank you all for the words of support, everyone. I did make sure to install security cameras after this event and have caught her trespassing a few times. And I've made sure to watch Max a lot closer while he is outside since this event. There have been a few more times where I've had to deal with this lady, but those are stories for later. Recently, the Karen confronted me again last week. Apparently she is divorced, gee, I wonder why, and the father won custody of the gremlin. She came to me with obvious fake tears and said it was all my fault, since they used the police report of the event in court against her. I had to hold back my laughter and just said, "Oh man, that sucks," and walked off. And yes, just in case she tries poisoning him, I got permission from the landlord to build a higher fence on my side, which I'm in the process of doing. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I know that a lot of my viewers are dog lovers and I know that some of you would probably go nuclear on this Karen if she tried to poison your dog or any of your pets. I think if you're a parent, it is really important to teach your kid how to handle animals and definitely not stab them or anything. In my opinion, that's a really important part of raising a child. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.